Imagine this. It's a scorching summer morning in July, the year 1518. The cobbled streets of Strasbourg shimmer with heat. The cathedral's bells toll heavy in the air, and the people are weary. Famine has gnawed at their stomachs. Disease lingers in the alleys, and faith is their only refuge. But then, on this morning, a woman steps into the street. Without music, without festivity, without reason, she begins to dance. Her feet slap against the stones, her arms flail, and she cannot stop. Day turns to night, and still she moves. Her body trembles, sweat pours down her face, her hands claw at the air. And soon, dozens, then hundreds, are drawn into this bizarre and terrifying spectacle. Some laugh, some cry, some beg for mercy, but none can rest. The city has become a stage of madness, and the dance will claim lives. This is not folklore. This is not legend. This is the true story of the dancing plague of 1518, one of Europe's eeriest and most unsettling historical mysteries. Let's set the scene. Strasbourg, the summer of 1518. To understand this bizarre epidemic, we must step back into the world of early 16th century Strasbourg, a city then under the rule of the Holy Roman Empire. Strasbourg, though prosperous in trade, was no stranger to hardship. Its citizens lived in fear of famine, outbreaks of plague, and above all, divine punishment. Religion wasn't just belief, it was the air they breathed, the explanation for every misfortune, the guide for every decision. And misfortune was everywhere. Just before the outbreak, the region had been struck by poor harvests. The mighty Rhine River, lifeblood of the city's commerce, brought not only wealth but also floods that destroyed crops. Hunger stalked the narrow streets. Families counted every crust of bread, and malnutrition weakened both body and spirit. The oppressive summer heat only deepened despair. Imagine cramped wooden homes, the stench of waste and disease rising in the humid air. Rats scurried across alleys, reminders of the plagues that had ravaged Europe in the not-so-distant past. Taxes, demanded by both local lords and the empire, crushed the poor further. Strasbourg was a city simmering with tension, economic, political, and spiritual. And in this cauldron of misery, superstition flourished. Tales of saints punishing sinners, of witches casting spells, of demons tormenting the faithful, were whispered in taverns and muttered in churches. To a society where science was primitive and the unseen ruled the imagination, the stage was perfectly set for something extraordinary and terrifying. The first dancer, Frau Troffea. The strange tale begins with one woman, Frau Troffea. In mid-July, she stepped out into the narrow, sun-baked streets of Strasbourg and began to dance. Not with joy, not with celebration, but with a haunting, compulsive movement. Her neighbors watched as her arms jerked, her feet pounded the stones, and her body twisted uncontrollably. She danced for hours. At first, some may have thought it was a cruel jest or a fit of madness. But as daylight waned and torches were lit, she continued. Her husband, desperate, tried to drag her inside, but it was as though she was gripped by invisible hands, forced to keep moving. By the second day, crowds gathered. Whispers spread. Was she bewitched? Had she been cursed? Or was this some divine punishment sent as a warning to the people? On the third day, her body trembled with exhaustion. Her shoes soaked with blood, her face pale and gaunt, yet still her limbs jerked and twisted. She did not laugh, she did not sing, she danced in torment. And then others began to join her. The madness spreads. Within a week, more than 30 people were dancing uncontrollably in the streets of Strasbourg. By the end of the month, that number had swollen to nearly 400. Men, women, young, old, no one was spared. Some came willingly, as if drawn by a force they couldn't resist. Others collapsed, writhing, their limbs jerking even as they lay on the ground, only to rise again and continue their dreadful dance. The spectacle was horrifying. Some witnesses claimed that dancers laughed manically, their mouths frothing, their eyes vacant. Others cried out for help, gasping for breath between jerks and twitches. Physicians recorded cases of dancers collapsing from strokes, heart attacks, or sheer exhaustion. For some, the dance was a death sentence. Imagine the scene. Narrow medieval streets echoing with the sound of stamping feet, the cries of the afflicted, the prayers of terrified onlookers. Priests declared it the work of demons. Families tried to restrain their loved ones, only to see them break free as though possessed. Strasbourg was no longer a city of order. It had become an open-air stage of madness and horror. The horror, death, and despair. As days turned to weeks, the horror deepened. Eyewitness accounts tell us of dancers collapsing in pools of sweat, their bodies jerking even as their eyes rolled back. Others danced until their ribs cracked from exertion, until their feet bled through their shoes, until their hearts gave out. At night, the city did not rest. Torches flickered as the afflicted moved in grotesque rhythms. The streets echoed with anguished cries, the sound of flesh striking stone, the guttural prayers of priests trying to exorcise what they believed were demons. Families wailed, powerless, as they watched husbands, wives, and children consumed by this strange affliction. To the superstitious, this was no ordinary illness. It was the wrath of Saint Vitus, a figure believed to punish sinners with uncontrollable dancing. Others whispered of witchcraft, of curses placed upon the city for its sins. Some even believed that the devil himself walked among them, leading the dancers in his infernal revelry. But most terrifying of all, no one knew who would be taken next, how the authorities tried to stop it. Desperate to end the madness, the city council turned to the physicians. Armed with the limited knowledge of the time, they declared it was not a spiritual affliction, but a physical one, an illness of hot blood. Their bizarre prescription? More dancing. Yes, to cure the afflicted, authorities ordered the construction of wooden stages. They even hired musicians and professional dancers to accompany the possessed, believing that if the victims danced freely, the sickness would run its course and leave their bodies. But the result was catastrophic. Instead of ending the madness, the music only fueled it. Drums thundered, fiddles screeched, and the afflicted danced harder, longer, more violently. The spectacle grew into a grotesque carnival of death, sanctioned by the very authorities meant to protect their people. What was meant to be a cure had become a horror show. Strasbourg was now a city caught in a nightmare, its streets transformed into a dance floor of despair. So what could have really caused this? Centuries later, historians and scientists still puzzle over the dancing plague of 1518. What could possibly cause hundreds of people to dance themselves to death? Theory 1. Ergot poisoning. Some scholars suggest the culprit was ergot, a toxic fungus that grows on damp rye. Consuming ergot-contaminated bread can cause hallucinations, convulsions, and a burning sensation in the limbs. It is the same fungus from which LSD is derived. Could the starving citizens of Strasbourg have consumed poisoned bread, triggering mass hallucinations and uncontrollable movements? But ergot poisoning often leads to gangrene, not prolonged dancing. And how could so many suffer the same symptom, compulsive dancing, at the same time? Theory 2. Mass psychogenic illness. Another explanation is psychological. Under crushing stress, famine, disease, religious fear, entire communities can manifest symptoms through suggestion. This mass hysteria spreads like fire, with one person's affliction unconsciously imitated by others. In such a climate of fear, the sight of Frau Troffea could have triggered others to fall into the same trance, believing themselves cursed or punished by God. Theory 3. Religious fear and collective guilt. In the Middle Ages, religion shaped every thought. Fear of sin and divine punishment was immense. Some historians argue that the people of Strasbourg, racked with guilt and fear, may have entered a kind of mass trance, a desperate, unconscious attempt to appease God or Saint Vitus by dancing. Theory 4. Political and social protest. A few researchers even suggest the dance may have been a form of protest. In a society crushed by taxes, famine, and injustice, perhaps the people expressed their desperation not with words, which could bring punishment, but with uncontrollable movement. And yet, none of these explanations fully satisfy. Why did the dancing last for weeks? Why did it affect hundreds with such intensity? Why did it suddenly vanish as mysteriously as it began? How the dancing finally stopped. By September, the authorities abandoned their stages and musicians. Instead, they turned back to faith. The afflicted were taken to a shrine dedicated to Saint Vitus in Saverne, where priests performed rituals, sprinkled holy water, and prayed for deliverance. And slowly, the madness subsided. The dancers grew fewer, their movements weaker, until finally, the city was silent once more. But Strasbourg would never forget that summer. Families mourned the dead. Survivors bore scars, both physical and psychological. And rumors spread across Europe, cementing the dancing plague of 1518 as one of history's strangest and most terrifying events. The dancing plague remains one of history's great mysteries. Was it poison bread, a psychological contagion, religious hysteria, or something darker, a curse, a punishment, a force beyond our comprehension? We may never know. But what makes it truly chilling is not the deaths themselves, but the image it leaves behind. Hundreds of ordinary people, caught in a rhythm they could not escape, moving to music no one else could hear, until their bodies betrayed them. It is this image, haunting, tragic, inexplicable, that lingers across centuries. Because sometimes, history is scarier than any legend. This was the story of the dancing plague of 1518, a medieval mystery that terrified a city. If you found yourself drawn into this dark chapter of history, subscribe for more tales of kingdoms, colonies, and the strange mysteries they left behind. Because as we've just seen, the past still dances with secrets, and not all of them rest in peace.